Good morning and welcome to today's session with me, Nick Murphy from Academia. And this morning we're joined by Rob Dalgleish, Senior Engineer with Sophos. And together we'll be looking at Sophos MDR and taking a deeper dive into what that means for education. Quick look at today's agenda. Just while we run through the agenda, quick bit of housekeeping from us. So questions are open. Please ask them as we run through today's session. We'll be responding to those at the end. We'll have full Q&A at the end for those questions that do come through. Just to let you know as well, no fire alarms are planned for today. So if something does happen, I'm afraid we'll need to reconvene at a more convenient time, but we're not planning anything like that so far. So as we look at the agenda, I'll be running through Academia's intro and take a quick look at what Academia does and the support that we get with and from Sophos. We'll be looking at colleges and universities, how they're being targeted, take a closer look at MDR itself with Rob, the experiences of implementing an MDR solution, and then just quickly covering off how Academia helps the education sector as well. And we'll kind of wrap that up throughout today's session. So moving on, quick little bit about Academia itself, a growing partner of yours with named account managers for all our customers, one of the few that's still on the rise, and a Sophos Platinum partner, importantly. And what do? Well, we're with you from the very start of your own approach to your network. So from those devices that are being procured, from the planning of that, through to the platform that they'll be operating on, the platforms that you'll need to support them with the data. And at the very forefront of that is cyber services and the cybersecurity piece. And that's where we want to be. We want to make sure that you get the right solution in place and it remains safe for you. So whether that means pen testing or taking a cyber maturity assessment, we're there for all those parts, as well as making sure you have a fully managed service. And that managed service carries on right through to the whole life cycle of those devices and those platforms as well. So whatever you're procuring with and from Academia, we'll scope that with you, including some really innovative, creative services as well, which if you haven't taken a look at before, do take a closer look at that. And a deeper dive into the security services. So our framework is really built around you and making sure that we're with you, whether you're from the very start of this, taking a look at cybersecurity. And that means, do you need some assistance with maybe taking a look at a maturity assessment, where you are now and where you would like to be? Or maybe you're on that journey already and you're taking a look at cyber essentials, whether that's cyber essentials or cyber essentials plus. We have the technical team here to come along, assist you with the required assistance that you may need. In there as well, you'll see a QR code that links through to our cybersecurity pages. So if you'd like to take a closer look in your own time as well, please do click through link through the QR code, and we'll be there to assist you as well. A closer look at the compliance piece as well. So although we take you from this scoping and the part of procurement and making sure that you remain secure, very little is as frustrating as getting to the procurement stage and finding out from the procurement team that you need to go through a different process to what you're expecting. Well, we make that as simple as possible. Tier 1, SLRA, Lot 4, and Lot 5. And if you'd like to take a closer look at the frameworks that we're on for all your procurement needs, do please click through on the QR code. We're here with you for that. So by all means, take a look. In Lot 4, miscellaneous software and licenses, and Lot 5, software services, which includes the cloud optimization services as well and cloud readiness, just to assure you that that's where we are as well. So why are we here this morning? Well, good question, but it's a threat to education and it's generally ransomware, right? So would you take a look at how ransomware in education compares to every other sector out there, you'll see that it's top of the pile. And that's because of many, many reasons that you're already aware. Now, whether that is from some aging equipment, whether it's from vulnerabilities that haven't been patched because of various software requirements that are out there, limited space with the team, so many variations. But when you compare the education sector to the rest of those verticals out there, it's a very targeted area. And this report is taken from the State of Ransomware report created by Sophos. And again, if you'd like to take a closer look and deep dive into that report, there's a link there for you. And so what does it mean to be hit by ransomware? Well, rather than being on many other webinars that you may have seen that will target the higher education, the further education space, we've taken a look at the Health Service Executive, something that happened back in 2021, slightly aged now, but importantly, the reports have now been released about the investigations that have taken place in there. So there's 2 or 3 really important investigations that have happened. And I was taking a thorough forensic look at exactly what happened, the steps that happened, and really importantly, taking a look at what has come out of those reports and preparing for the future. So why would this relate into the university and college space? Well, many devices all connected throughout many different campuses, lots of staff working on those campuses. Not everyone is focused around cybersecurity, but there was a team of 15 cybersecurity staff specialized in looking after those devices and those staff. However, through a ransomware attack, the laboratory trials were interrupted, the results were frozen, internal and external communication was politely compromised, and it was a huge ransomware attack, bringing down the whole health service in Ireland. And what came out with the results? So back in 2021, there was a realization that it may take 2, possibly 3 months for ransomware to be dropped, little pieces of information put together by the attacker as they were to become more aware of the network and start moving around within that environment. There's now a realization that same attack would be involved and committed within less than 24 hours. And it's quite a scary piece to say that over three years, we've seen that progress come from the cyberware gangs. Of course, having a fragmented network as well, with the many campuses, many staff and many requirements, can lead to cracks in the system as well. And that's where we'll listen to and hear from Rob about how you can start filling those gaps and preparing for a ransomware attack. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Nick. Hope I remember to take myself off mute this time. Good morning. I'm Rob. I'm one of the enterprise pre-sales team here at Sophos. I'm one of academia's aligned sales engineers because I have a 20-year background in education and public sector computing and security. Hence, I've been asked to join this webinar with Nick today, and it's a great pleasure to be here and to be talking to you. Nick has very nicely keyed me up for this one because the HSE attack in Ireland, although we weren't directly involved with it, we had a customer who interfaced with HSE, and we were actually able to alert that customer to some of the signs of compromise coming from HSE before they actually the attack went live. And this is one of the things we're going to talk about as we talk about MDR, so managed detection and response. Why is it managed detection? Well, managed detection is the term that we use for taking data from your systems, and there may be systems that you have with us, there may be systems you have with a third party, and we'll talk more about that later. We take that data, we look through it for indicators of compromise, we look through it for indicators of attack, we look through it for things that suggest something is going on in your network. The response part of that is that not only do we do that detection and alert you to it, but we can also, on your behalf, take action. So I'm going to go to the next slide. As Nick has already mentioned, education remains in the firing line. Many people in education don't fully comprehend that education is a very, very, very important sector to cyber criminals. And the reason for that is that you have, in education, lots of data. You will have data on staff, you will have data on students. Those in the primary and secondary may well have information on students' parents as well. And you will have all kinds of things like possibly scans of passports, driving licenses, utility bills, because you've been taking scans of those to do CRB checks, DBS checks on staff, things like that. Education also relies on computing. So attackers know that there's a good chance that your insurance is going to pay up and give them some money. And what I'm going to talk about this morning is I'm going to talk as we go through about an attack on an education provider. I'm not going to name them as we go through, but a large education provider who had a cyber attack Easter 2021, and some of the things that they experienced during that attack. Some of the reasons that you might want to look at managed detection and response, as we've already said, education is very heavily in the firing line. It's also difficult in education sometimes to get the funding that we would like for cyber projects. It's difficult to recruit and retain staff into those roles when you're competing against businesses who are prepared to pay a lot more money for cybersecurity staff. And as a result, it's difficult to retain those people once you've trained them. You can see there some data from a cybersecurity report that we've produced. 4 in 10 IT managers say that improving efficiency is a key priority. Quarter of managers, 27%, skill shortage. There are millions and millions of unfilled roles within the cybersecurity industry currently. And it's very difficult for people to recruit into those roles. Less of a problem for us as a cybersecurity vendor. We have a little bit of a cash area. I work at Sophos. It does tend to drag people in a little bit and keep them here a little bit longer, perhaps. Let's talk about some of the costs of a cyber attack. The education provider that I'm going to talk about today, their final bill was somewhere in the region of £750,000. Okay, so £750,000, and that included overtime for contractors, overtime for staff, overtime for contractors to come in and rebuild PCs. It involved many other things which we'll talk about later on. Some of them you might not believe, but this is all genuinely true. It involved having to rebuild services, rebuild workstations. It involved having to have people re-input lost data. It involved people having to re-input, attendance records and things that had been taken on paper because the computer systems were down. 74% of cybersecurity teams in education saw their workload increase last year. Nearly 2/3 there say cyber attacks are getting too advanced for them to deal with. And the worrying one for me is only half of education establishments have a recovery plan, an instant recovery plan. Okay. So how do we fit into this? Our endpoint gives you multiple layers of defense. Okay. So we're going to start off at the bottom of this pyramid. We're going to reduce your exposure to threats. We're going to do that by all those little things that you do as an IT team, blocking access to USB devices, blocking inappropriate web pages, controlling what applications, what peripherals your users can use. That's your base layer. On top of that, we're going to start looking at malicious activity that might be happening on your devices, and we're going to start trying to block those malicious behaviors such as ransomware. Sophos Intercept X has an anti-ransomware capability built in, which we call CryptoGuard, and it can actually deal with ransomware running on the local device, and it can also stop ransomware running and encrypting files from a remote device on your servers, for example. Above that, we have a layer of response protections within the product that are automatic and that will kick in when they see some of those behaviors. So for example, we might see people trying to delete files. We might see people trying to reboot the device in safe mode. And what we're going to do, we're going to stop that happening because those are things that really only an IT admin should perhaps be doing. At the top of that pyramid, you will see there the XDR, EDR functionality in the product. And that is all about taking in new data, taking in more data to have a look at what's happening on those devices, where they're communicating to on the internet, perhaps, what software is installed, what processes are running, what users are doing. And we're going to take all of that data and we're going to do things with it. Okay, so lots of defense in depth there. You may have other products doing some of these things. You may have Bulwark, for example, doing ransomware protection as well. You may have Microsoft Intune blocking out USB sticks. It doesn't matter what important. You need to reduce your threat exposure, reduce your capabilities first. Once we've captured all of that data and some more besides, we need to do something with it. We need to run detections. And this is where MDR starts to come into its own. What we're going to do as we gather that data, we take it into our data lake. And the way we do that, we take that from lots of places. You can see on the left there from your endpoint. We can ingest data from our own firewalls, from third-party firewalls. We can ingest data from email providers, so Microsoft Office 365. We can ingest Proofpoint. We can ingest Mimecast. We can take that data in. We can take it from network detection response systems, think Canary, Darktrace, our own NDR sensors. We can take it from various identity providers. And all of that data is very, very valuable because it tells us what's happening within your environment. We then do some cleaning up on that data because, as you can imagine, all these different types of data might look slightly different, might report things differently. Once we've collected that data, we can then start to put a bit of context around it. We can start to link things together. We can then allow you to investigate that data, or we can do it on your behalf. I mentioned incident plans. This is a screenshot of a WhatsApp message I got back in January. I live up in the frozen north of West Cumbria, and about 11 years ago we had a very, very sad incident. We had a man who was at the end of his tether, and he went on the rampage with a shotgun, killed 9 people. It was very, very sad. What it did mean, though, is that all of the schools in that area have now got a plan for what happens if someone else does the same thing. And you can see here, January, rumour went around town, something was going to happen. All of the schools had a plan. My children's school, for example, they actually had a plan, and they said, well, do you know what? This is a really good time to test our plan out, to test our incident response plan. What I want you to think about as you go off this call later on is, do we have a cyber incident response plan? What is the plan? What does it look like? How do we implement it? Have we tested it? Okay, let's talk about a cyber attack. Then we've talked about response plan. How do you know if your system is being compromised? How do you tell that something has happened? Nick talked earlier about the attack on HSE, where that attacker was in there for 2 months. We're commonly seeing that coming down a lot now. The mean dwell time is now 11 days. This again is from the state ransomware reports. And most ransomware is going to be deployed between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. because attackers know that this is when you are not in your system to look after it. Yeah. Typically, it will happen on a Monday night into a Tuesday. Don't ask me why Monday night to a Tuesday, but that's the time that they go for. And between 10 o'clock Monday night, 6 o'clock Tuesday morning. The education provider that I referred to earlier, they had theirs actually happen on a Friday evening. They'd had a warning from NCSC that there was potentially a compromise going to happen in the education sector. They'd prepared. They had antivirus systems in place. They had their endpoints patched. They thought they had done as much as possible, but what had actually happened is that a teacher at home had logged on to the school webmail. They'd had some kind of keylogger installed on their personal laptop that they'd used to access the webmail, and that had given the attackers credentials where they could log on to the VPN for the education establishment. At that point, they spent 3 to 4 hours probing the defenses of that establishment. They were testing the capabilities of the AV software. It was a hands-on keyboard attack. It was live. They were doing things in real time. After about 4 hours, they managed to overwhelm the AV service. Now, that was pure AV, pure endpoint protection. There was no human intervention. With managed detection and response, all of those things, all of that would have fed into our data lake, and we would have started to see those signs of compromise. What we might have done in that occasion is we might have said, right, actually, we've spotted this user logging in from somewhere where they don't normally come from. they're coming in from a foreign country, perhaps, rather than coming in from within the UK. It looks like they're trying to do things that user doesn't normally do, and we believe that the user's password has been compromised. At that point, what we can do is we can, as an MDR team, we can suspend that account. We can force a password change on the user, perhaps, and that would have stopped that attack at that point before that rolled on to, encrypted servers, encrypted workstations, loss of data. The way that we could have done that, we can take that data from lots and lots of places. I mentioned Office 365, I mentioned Proofpoint, I mentioned Mimecast. You can see on there, we can see lots of data now. One of our newest integrations is the backup and recovery category. That Veeam integration, although it says on my slide coming soon, that is actually now live. And Veeam and ourselves have worked on this integration. We're all very proud of it. And what we can do, we can look at things like our encryption keys being changed, our passwords being changed, our backups being removed that we don't expect to be removed. Has there been a bigger change in the backup than we expect there to be given the amount of data on the system? All of that data feeds into the data lake and can generate cases. One of the major differences with Sophos MDR is many MDR systems will ingest data. Our platform will case generate from third-party data. So we have a set of what we call platform detections, which interface with Microsoft Office 365. That's a free integration with MDR. I know lots of education providers use Office 365. That platform integration can take data directly from Office 365 without you necessarily having to have MS Defender running and E5 licenses, E3 licenses, and we can look at behaviors and we can generate cases from that behavior. So lots of different things we can pull into the data lake to generate cases from. So our education provider, let's go back to them. It's now Saturday morning. Their chief exec has had a phone call on the golf course from one of their techies to say our files have been encrypted. At this point, they are starting to realize the severity of the attack, and they're starting to realize that this might not be something that they can turn around very quickly. The ransomware team involved have done their research on the organization. They've got the mobile number of the chief executive. They've got the mobile number of a couple of his deputies. They're ringing these people up and they are talking to them directly and saying, look, give us money, we can make this go away. And in fact, not just give us money, we can make it go away, give us money and we'll tell you how you got into your system, which is a really scary thought. The comment from the chief exec was that it was like ringing a call center. He says, except you got better service from this guy than you did from the call center. They would answer the phone. They chose, and I think this is the ethically correct way to do things, they chose not to pay the ransomware. They choose to take the hit and rebuild. Some people will choose to pay the ransom. I would not recommend it. There is no guarantee with ransomware that if you pay the ransom money, that your data will decrypt successfully. Yeah. Again, going back to our state of ransomware, something like 60% of data is recoverable when people have paid ransom. 40% of that data is lost. So again, have a think as you go off the call, which half of my data can I do without, potentially, in an attack. So, servers have been encrypted, networks down. What's failed? Well, the obvious thing, the computers have failed. We can't print, we can't log on, we can't go on the internet. We can't take attendance data, we can't see who's in lectures, we can't see who's in classes, because those systems are all electronic. Some of the things may be reasonably commonly thought of. VoIP telephony. Yeah, these guys had VoIP telephony between their different sites. All of a sudden, because the network's down, because we've shut it down to stop the transit of this ransomware between systems, our telephone system went down. CCTV systems commonly these days use IP to transit data between cameras and DVRs, digital video recorders, to store data. Some of them are stored on servers, some are stored on DVRs. All of these things need the network up and running to be able to pass data. even if they're on different VLANs, if they're kept separate from all of your core network traffic, you bring the network down, you may bring those down as well. Other things that this organization found had gone off: heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems. Many building management systems now, especially in new buildings, have a computer in them somewhere that connects them to the internet so that it can talk back to the manufacturer and say, send the man out to service it, it needs a new filter, whatever it happens to be. All of those systems failed because there was no network. Access control systems, the building was not secure because those systems relied on being able to talk back to things like Active Directory to check that people's swipe cards were going to allow them into this room, whatever it happened to be. And the dangerous one, remember I said earlier about that £750,000 bill? Part of that was to employ fire wardens to walk around some of the buildings because the fire alarms were on the network and could not be relied upon to work. So a cyber attack, we think about computers. We don't think about all of the other connected systems that we potentially have now in a modern connected world. So have a think as you're building your response plans. Think about all of these things. Check what's connected to your network. It's very, very easy for things to slip in and people to forget about them. So, detection, impact. Let's talk a little bit about response. I hope your response plan does not look like this. And I would encourage you to go away, find them, dig them out, test them if you can. It's very, very important. Manage detection and response. Let's talk about how we can respond to things. So, the education establishment that we talked about earlier, they started looking around for someone to help them. And remember what we said about that shortage of staff earlier? They found out that all of the DFIR providers, digital forensic incident response providers they approached, were unable to help because they were already committed to other customers. Okay, that includes the DFIR team that they were referred to by their cyber insurer. So they had nobody who could come in at that point and help them. So they had to start on their own and pick up an incident response later on. For Sophos, we have what we call our rapid response team. And our rapid response, you can pick the phone up in an incident and you can speak to the rapid response team. We can do what we call a compromise assessment, where we're going to check for signs of compromise, or we can do a full 45-day engagement where we're going to come in and clean up and restore systems and bring you back to good health. One thing to remember when you're looking at your cyber insurance, they may have a panel of DFIR providers who will do these things for you. If you are doing that, do remember that those providers are not working for you, they are working for your insurer, and they may be looking for things that you have not perhaps done that you should have done, and that may have an impact on how much payout, if at all, your cyber insurance will give you. If you have MDR, we do have a number of customers who've bought MDR, and their insurance premiums, as a result, have actually paid for a 3-year subscription to manage detection response. Yeah, they were having 6-figure quotes for cybersecurity, and by going back and saying, actually, Sophos have come along, they're going to take over this managed detection response piece for us. They're going to run a 24/7 security operations center for us. They're going to respond to all of these incidents. And we actually have a breach protection warranty that we put in place and we back with our own money. Because we then take that risk off cyber insurer will normally provide some level of discount to you as a customer. So our rapid response, our managed detection response teams are based in 7 security operations centers around the world. I have asked for many months now if I can go and visit the one in Hawaii. I don't think it's happening. They're not going to let me do that, sadly. I visited the one in Oxford, I visited the one in Dublin, but you know, it is what it is. Those teams work on a follow the sun principle, so there is always somebody there to look at your system should there be any indicators of compromise. And the timeframes for that, remember we talked about the data ingestion from all of the different integrations into third-party products. We talked about the data coming from our own endpoint. Our target time for that data to actually be processed and in the data lake and generating detections is a minute. Okay. We then have a 25-minute investigation window is what we aim for. And at that point, at that investigation, we can either begin remediation, which is going to take us on average about 12 minutes because we're seeing these things so early, there is not a lot for us to remediate. There's not a lot that we need to do. Remember, in the case of that education establishment, it was a compromised password. Because we got in there early, we could have shut that down and made that a much, much smaller incident than it actually became. Yeah. So if they'd had MDR in place, we could have spotted that behavior, we could have shut down the account, the attack wouldn't have been able to continue in the same way. So that's why we have such small response times. The numbers on that slide there come from a Gartner review of the average response times for companies with their own internal security teams. The fastest response on average 3 3/4 hours, the slowest response 30 hours. Remember what I said, that attacker was in there 3-4 hours before they overwhelmed the defense in the endpoint. It really is, time is of the essence when you're under attack. And this is where MDR can help. Because we are specialists, because we have people there 24/7, 365, as soon as we see something happening, we can jump in and act. Yeah, we can get in there and stop things escalating before they go too far. So, Sophos MDR, we're monitoring 24/7. It's a highly skilled team of experts, and they do lots of different things within the team. So we have people who are tier 1, tier 2 analysts. We have people who are threat hunters. They will go out and do live threat hunting. So as well as the proactive hunting that we've talked about, we also do proactive hunting. So for example, if we see within education providers a particular type of attack happening to one provider, we know who else we have in that same sector. We can go away and look for signs of similar things happening in that sector. We've got somewhere in the region of 20,000 customers on MDR currently, millions of machines protected. That amount of data that we're seeing, we are the largest MDR provider in the world. We've got something like twice the number of our next 3 competitors added together. Gives us a massive amount of data to look through and to scan and to examine. And we use lots of tools to do that, to go through there and to pull out what's relevant, what is important, and what can be ignored. Okay, and we have teams who go through that data with the help of AI, with machine learning, and they can write new detections based on the things that they're seeing. Okay, we do have that full-scale incident response available, so we can do all of that response for you, from the initial detection, investigation. We can then hand it over to you to your team to deal with. We can deal with it for you. We can work together on it. It's a service that can be adapted to suit your needs. And again, because we've got those integrations, it means that we can pull data from technology you already have. We're not saying rip everything out, put Sophos in. We'd love you to do that, obviously. But if you say, no, I've got these Palo Alto firewalls, for example, that's fine. We can pull data from those. We're not interested in who they're from. We're vendor agnostic. There are some benefits to having Sophos products in place because there are certain response actions that we can only take with Sophos devices. But again, we are starting now to build out response actions into third-party products. So you'll see more and more of those being developed over the next 12 months. So, why are people going for MDR? We've talked about the detection. We've talked about the response capabilities. What we've got humans looking at your data. They're backed up by AI, they're backed up by machine learning, but there are humans in front of that keyboard looking at what's going on. Important to note there, no retainers, unlike other providers, no hourly limits, no limits on number of cases that take place. For the term of your MDR contract, we are your SOC, and we will do our best for you. And one of the things that I always say is because we're charging you a fixed price, It's important for us to get the job right first time, because if we don't, we're only making more work for ourselves later on. Okay. Vendor consolidation. Because we're pulling all of this data from third-party platforms into the data lake, it means that we can show you all of that data in one single console. So your Sophos Central console that you may already be familiar with holds the data and the configuration from your endpoints, your firewalls, whatever it happens to be. All the data from your third-party tools can go into there. So if you want to have a look at something that's happening on Palo Alto Firewall, the data is held within Central. If you want to have a look at something that's happening within Mimecast Mail Protection, the data is held within Sophos Central. That means it's easier for you to go searching for that data because you're not having to go into different systems. It means it's easy for our MDR team to find that data because they're not having to go into different systems to find it. It's all in one place for them to look at. Because of that, it means that we can take that data away from you. We can take your security operations load away. So that proactive threat hunting, we can take that off your team. That response, we can take away from your team if you want. And what that means is that you have more time to focus on your day-to-day IT tasks. So that means you can devote more time perhaps to patching. It means you can devote more time to machine management, to making sure that endpoints are up to date, to making sure that everything has the correct antivirus on, perhaps the correct endpoint, and make yourselves more efficient because you're not having to do all of that security work. You know that there's someone there that can look after that for you. So, 20,000 plus MDR customers, 99.98% of threats are dealt with by MDR automatically without us having to get an analyst involved. Okay, you can see there, detection, investigation, response times. 1 minute to detect, 25 minutes to investigate, 12 minutes to respond. That is less than 3/4 of an hour. It's about 38 minutes if my maths is right. So, that is a really, really quick time when you consider how long some of these attacks sit inside people's networks before they're noticed. And I think this is my final slide now, Nick. So, time to wake up, I'm afraid. There are two levels of Sophos MDR. Okay, the premium level, if you will, is what we call Sophos MDR Complete. MDR Complete includes our endpoint. It includes monthly intelligence briefings. It includes lots of reporting. It includes expert-led threat hunting. It includes the response, the proactive pieces as well. And it allows you to call up and talk to us and say, can you do so? I've got a situation going on a machine. There might be something funny. Can you take a look at it for me? All of that is involved, is contained in both levels, MDR Essentials, MDR Complete. MDR Complete, though, adds the breach warranty in. It adds a dedicated response lead during the incident so that you always speak to the same analyst within the SOC. It gives you the full-scale incident response, and it gives you a root cause analysis. Not just what happened, but why did it happen, how did it happen, and what can we do to stop it happening again, please? Okay. You'll also get things like security posture reviews with the MDR team, and those are looking at your current setup, what's in place, what can you do to make it more secure, how can you drive your security forwards. MDR Essentials, you'll spot, is missing a couple of bits compared to Complete. So things like full-scale incident response isn't there. That's where we would hand back to your team. We've investigated, we've contained, but now it's time for you to do some work and clean up, please. We don't do root cause analysis on that, and the reason we don't do the root cause analysis is because MDR Essentials can be delivered with third-party AV products. So, for example, if you've decided to go down the Microsoft Defender route, you've got, including your A5 licenses, we're going to use Defender. That's fine. We can ingest the data from Defender, but it doesn't give us as many capabilities as having our native endpoint on. So even if you're being pushed down the line of going into Defender because it's included in your A5s, we can still take data into MDR. We can still do that monitoring piece for you. We can still ingest from other third parties. We can still do the correlation. The detection times are the same. The response times are the same. But It just means that you will need to do some more work at the end of it. And because it's not our product, we can't offer you that breach warranty. Okay. Always remember as well that cybersecurity is not a destination. We're never going to get to a place where we've done everything we need to do, because things will change. We were talking about this yesterday. I'm in Manchester with some colleagues this week. Whenever we come up with something, people will come up with the next thing that we're going to try and change. So as we build more capabilities into the product, people will start to change how they do their attacks. We block one thing, attackers will discover something else. They'll change. For example, you might have seen that it's harder and harder for people to get things through endpoint security. We're now starting to look and see more attacks coming into mobile devices, because it's easy to compromise mobile devices now than it is to compromise desktops. And again, if you can compromise the mobile, you can potentially get usernames, passwords for people's email addresses, things like that. So understand where you are now. We can come and help with that through academia. We can come along. We can do a posture review with you. And what we're going to do, we're not going to take giant leaps. We're going to do small things. How do you get MFA on everywhere? Let's put MFA in place, because that will cut down on a number of attacks that can take place. Review how far you've come. We started there. We're now here. Change systems and processes as you need to. Again, review and keep doing that loop, that constant iterative loop of we're here. What can we do to make things better? What can we do to make things more secure? Only by doing that can you make yourselves secure and secure as you can be at that point in time. Keep going. It's a long slog, but the end result is really honestly worth it. Thank you very much for listening. Nick, I'm going to hand back to you now, sir.
Thanks very much, Rob. Oh, really interesting, mate. Yeah, thank you for that. There's loads going on. I've got questions for you. When we get to the end, don't know that much. So I suppose we'll just take a look at wrapping up from the whole this morning's presentation. And we'll just recap on what we covered off this morning. And I'm just going to share this slide here. And this is our service wheel. It covers off everything that we discussed before you started, Rob. And this is academia taking you through the route from planning to procurement and post-procurement as well. So the account management piece and those other technical services that we provide to support. Important to remember as well, we are a Sophos Platinum partner, and we take the total cost of ownership as vital for you. And we want to create those successful outcomes. So moving into the Q&A, I would just say that we're offering a free cybersecurity posture assessment for all customers at the moment. That's available up until the end of May. For that, please get in touch with me, nick.murphy@academia.co.uk, or my colleague, James Ferguson, and we'll be able to take you through that cybersecurity assessment. But if there are any questions out there, we'd love to hear from you. If not, I have one for you, Rob, if I may. You mentioned the integration with Microsoft particularly, and I would just say before I ask a question, it's very unusual to see a vendor put all the names up of so many competitors in the field. It's an unusual approach. I was wondering why that approach, and what can you tell us a bit more about the integration with Microsoft, because we all use Microsoft in some form, and be just more interested in hearing about that as well.
Okay, it is perhaps an unusual approach, Nick. I think we are the only vendor in the industry that's taken this approach. But we realise that systems don't work in isolation, and there are two schools of thought in cybersecurity. Some people will go for, I want everything in one place with one vendor, and some people will go, well, actually, I think this is the best vendor for this particular stream, so email protection. I might think this is the best vendor for firewalls. And we started off a couple of years ago with what we called managed threat response, which was purely on Sophos data. And it was great, it was good, but we realized that there were bits of data that we were missing that would have made our investigations easier, more complete, would have given us better root cause analysis. So what we did, we actually purchased a company called Sophos, and Sophos brought with them the integrations tooling. So we spent about 12 months integrating that into our own platform, and that's allowed us now to start writing these integrations. And the beauty of it is that we can start to pull in data from many, many different vendors via different collection mechanisms based upon what that vendor has in place. And if you have something that's not on that list, it's not a case of, no, we don't integrate. It's a case of, well, give us a chance, actually, and we might, if we can get the information that we need, be able to integrate that in. Some of them, as you say, would be seen traditionally as competitors, but we prefer to see them as data sources these days. And some of the vendors, such as Veeam, are actually taking an active part in helping us build that integration, because they're very, very excited that backups, which traditionally, let's be honest, if you're going for an encryption attack, you want to kill those backups off. They're very excited that we've partnered with them to build that integration to allow that data to be ingested and to be watched for through our SOC. Going back to the Microsoft piece, Microsoft is used by many, many, many institutions, businesses, colleges, schools, universities throughout the country, throughout the world. And there is a lot of data that Office 365 can generate, which can overwhelm people. And what we've done as a company, we've decided, let's try and help people out with that, because it does affect your cybersecurity, because people now are starting to federate on-prem Active Directory with cloud services. You've got the same password, the same username for both, and that exposes your internal network to risk by having those passwords being able to be used externally. So we've looked at all the information that Microsoft generates, and we've actually developed some plugins which, as I said, come included with MDR, whichever level you're on. That pulls data into the data lake, and it allows us to start looking at what's happening. And just as an example, one we were talking about yesterday here in Manchester, a customer had got a phishing email that got through Office 365. It had landed on the workstation, but because we had some MDR rules in place that do detections on keywords and things in emails, we'd actually spotted that phishing attack and were able to go back to the customer and say, hang on a minute, your mail protection has actually missed this one, and we've picked it up in MDR. We're going to delete that mail from the user's mailbox, and we're going to block the IP address of the offending mail server, which happened to be a compromised server somewhere in the east of Europe, shall we say. So very, very powerful tool, Nick.
Yeah, so that's really interesting that it integrates that far and that deep. And it's important to just to restate that it's not just protecting devices, is it? It's protecting the data as well. And it's important to make sure that we clarify both of those things are both protected.
Yes. So we're looking at data access within Office 365 as well, things within SharePoint and OneDrive. All of that data is generated for us. The key challenge for us as a vendor is working out what is the important data that comes out of Office, because it can generate so much. But even without having those additional security bits of Defender in Office 365, A5, A3 licensing, because we're taking those detections and that data straight off the platform, we're able to do that level of investigation and to alert people to things that are happening there.
Fantastic. Great stuff. Right. I'm going to stop our slide there. And I think if we do have any questions, we may have to come back to it, because I'm getting nudged about the time that we've taken up here. So we'll call it there. Rob, thanks ever so much for joining us. That's been so useful and tons of information to take away and have a think about. So as I say, for everyone, if you'd like to get in touch and hear more about it, please do let us know. But for now, thank you very much. Bye-bye.